Hey everybody, it's Andy Tyndall. The podcast is going to get started in just a minute here. Today's episode, we're talking with Kirby Trapolino. Now, Kirby is a National Geographic published photographer. And the thing about him is he didn't start out to be a photographer. He started out wanting to help others. So much to the fact that he set up not one, but two not-for-profits to help victims of human trafficking. As a result of building that community to help these folks, Kirby ends up building another community within the world of photography, capturing the images of so many places, so many people around the world. And in this episode, he just goes through the highs and lows of building and starting a not-for-profit, but he also goes into what it's like to take pictures and the best techniques that we can use to capture memories that will last a lifetime. I hope you enjoy his ideas and some of the inspirational thoughts that he brings to this episode. Hey folks, welcome to the Human Side of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tyndall. Out in the world today, I have a lot of conversations, and some of the conversations really focus on the fact that, things need to get better. We need more hope in the world. Well, what I'll tell you today is that our next guest has been providing hope for the last 27 years, I should say. In fact, he's the founder of Peace Gospel International and She Has Hope, which are charitable organizations that focus on serving orphans, child labor victims, as well as survivors of sex trafficking. Now, above and beyond that, he's also the first ever National Geographic published photographer that I've ever met. So I thought that was pretty cool. And if he were to describe himself, I think he'd describe himself as a dreamer, an idealist, and a traveler. But in my simple heart, he's a humanitarian. Folks, welcome Kirby Trapolino to the show.
Thanks, Andy. It's good to be here. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Thank you for being on the show for sure. So at the top of every show, we kick off with two simple questions. And, knowing your background a little bit as a photographer, you've probably been to a lot of different remote locations and that sort of thing. So for your first question, I thought, well, what if you're on a shoot and it's an exotic location? You've seen many before. You have a forest behind you or jungle behind you, and you have the beach out front. But your battery goes dead and you don't have a backup battery. What do? Do you go for a walk through the jungle or go for a swim?
I definitely would go for a swim.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, easy. I love the ocean. I love being in the water. I love an open horizon. It just brings serenity, tranquility. A lot of times I have found in more pressing, trying seasons and trials in my life that if I go out a little past the surf and just look out on the horizon and have a conversation with my creator, a lot of things just kind of are released out into that openness. So I just love, I think we are a part of something bigger.
Big time.
And the ocean kind of is a good metaphor for that, I think.
Yeah, so it sounds like you get out there, you're way past the surf, and everything that you thought was really pressing or really an issue, they just kind of melt away.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me that God is bigger, that we're all together in this. And I love the analogy. One of my all-time favorite photograph, which I'm ashamed that I don't know the astronaut who shot it. I should memorize the credit of this photo, but it's called Earthrise, and it was taken from the lunar orbiter as they were orbiting the moon, and there was the picture of the Earth rising over the horizon of the moon. Oh, wow. And so I just love the analogy of Earth, dangling in this darkness. And in that sense, it's really, we're just this tiny blue orb in the infinity of space. And so it's kind of, I'm sort of a sci-fi.
Me too. It's all good. Me too.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not all in, but I love a good sci-fi. And so I like the analogy. I like the analogy and the metaphor of a vessel and a voyage. Like we're all on this vessel together, and we're on a voyage, and we're on a path. And so I like to think of Earth and all of us together on this tiny spaceship. And so it kind of, it deconstructs all these concepts of borders and conflict. And when the astronauts were up there just looking at this little beautiful blue marble, they commented often on, like, it's amazing to think how small we are.
Yeah.
And how in context, it just kind of puts everything in perspective, I think.
And from that distance too, way up above, you can't see any of the silly skirmishes or the idiot stuff that we're doing down here on the planet. It just looks beautiful altogether.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. So, all right. So you go out for your swim, all right? You go out for your swim, you come back in, and you find that there are no more coconuts on the coconut tree. So you can't get any coconut water. You can't enjoy any of the meat that's inside of the coconut either. But lo and behold, there is a popcorn machine and a cotton candy machine. Which do you pick as your refreshing snack, popcorn or cotton candy?
Oh, definitely popcorn. Yeah, man. It's at least would have tied me over. Fills the stomach a little bit.
Man, that's great. That's great. So good choices. All good choices. My kids would have probably picked both popcorn and cotton candy. So good choices. So man, I love what you're doing. I really do feel like you are a humanitarian in every sense of the word. Take us back 27 years ago or so when this idea comes out. How do you get started? How do you get the inspiration to create these two great organizations to help so many people?
Oh goodness. Yeah. It just goes way back. I mean, 17, 18 years old. I don't know. I could go back even further. I think really I would think a defining chapter in my life would be when I was 6 years old, actually. My mother got me a subscription to National Geographic, and I can, the cover, I'll never forget getting that issue of the January 1979 National Geographic with there's a big statue in Afghanistan. It's a Buddhist statue, and it was actually later destroyed by the Taliban.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Anyway, just that, just kind of opening a sort of the magazine is shaped in that kind of the shape of a portal or a door, and it's just like that world opened up to me as a child. Was just I really loved getting each issue, and just felt like it was a window to the rest of the world, and it was just always fascinating to me. And I don't know, I just had a vivid imagination as a child, and I really dreamed of traveling. And so there was this opportunity that came up when I was 16, 17, and it was like a cross-cultural service missions organization that try to challenge youth to get out of the United States, to experience different cultures, to do cross-cultural outreach, and kind of be ambassadors of, in my view, I mean, I don't know that this would have been the stated mission of that organization, but in my view, I just love, and I think everyone should encourage their children and themselves. If you don't have children, I think everyone should travel. I think it helps us just become more in tune with the fact that we have much more in common than we do have differences.
So question there, real quick.
What's that?
So right there, you're saying that the travel could, and this is kind of like my rationale based on what you just said. Is it possible that the travel and seeing other things decreases or even could eliminate some of the stereotypes that we see through the television or the internet or whatever source?
100%. Yeah, I believe it. And it just gives us better understanding of what, just the comment that we all wake up every day and, face a lot of the same anxieties of just what we're going to do with our lives. It's just it's a great equalizer to just sit with people from all over the world in their neighborhoods. And I love it. So anyway, I went on this trip, and it was to northern Greece of all places. And it was like a little youth camp that we were volunteering for. And we did a lot. Like this campus was really struggling. It would just, kind of rough around the edges. And we were this group of 30 teenagers who camped in tents there. And we, every day we just got up with like a mission to clean up this campus and fix it up. And we built a retaining wall where they were having a little washout at the downhill on the campus. And it was just unbelievable. We were in this little town outside of Thessalonica, Salonika, they call it there.
Okay.
And, I personally, I love the history of the disciples, Jesus's disciples, and that pure phase of that chapter of Christianity right after Jesus's ascension, and the 300-year period before Constantine instituted the church,
the business side of things.
Yeah. I always challenge people. I'm like, I don't even know. I don't necessarily define myself with I don't like labels. I think labels are unfortunate. But as for me and my faith journey, my worldview, I have friends from all different faith backgrounds, from all my travels, and so many different photography friends. But as for me personally, I love the purity of the early church, and it was very communal. And there's even some socialistic concepts. And here you think socialism, oh my gosh, it's so awful. But it's like these labels just give us so many, when we hear socialism, we think
so one-dimensional, and there's so many different aspects of it.
Yeah. But because my son, he loves philosophy, loves studying and reading, and so we talk about all kinds of topics. But and he's got a lot of a lot of conversations among young people talking about socialism and communism and all these things. And it's like, I was raised to think that that's just like, that's awful. You don't talk about communism or anything. Right. But it's interesting because in my conversation, I know we're totally chasing around.
Good, all good. It's all good. That's what this is for. Yeah.
But in my conversations, in my son is actually a debate champion. Like he went to the state championship and won like the Lincoln Douglas debate for his high school, and went on to the national debate championships and all this stuff. So I don't stand a chance with him
on any subject.
But it's interesting because I've used the book of Acts as kind of like this common ground for this concept of like, hey, actually, the purest concept of communism is simply like living in a commune, like a kibbutz would be the purest concept of communism. And then we think, oh, well, Russia and Soviet Russia was it was communism. What an awful failed experiment, obviously. But it's just something really beautiful and pure about the way that if you actually read the book of Acts, which I would challenge your viewers to go back and read for the first time if you haven't, because there's a real purity and simplicity in that they shared everything they had in common, and they took care of each other, and they bore one another's burdens. And I think that's the beauty of and because you asked, what was my inspiration?
Yeah, no doubt.
And that was really it for me. I had a teacher in high school who was an artist, and had been to Woodstock and the whole 9 yards, and he was an illustrator, and he would talk about the gospel in a way that I was raised Catholic, and grew up in church my whole life, but he talked about the gospel in such a way that was like, wait, that's not what
that's not what the book said. That's not how the teachers told me.
I've never heard, Christianity or the gospel described like this, and was much more of a relational thing, and this idea of community, and like people really picking up the slack, and when somebody falls down, the other picks them up, and there's this strength in community. And I was really, so I, and so I got to go to northern Greece, and we would wake up. I would unzip my tent every morning and see where Paul and Silas had come in from Philippi into Thessalonica, where and so that was like the church at Thessalonica.
That's right.
His first and second letters that he wrote to the church at Thessalonica, First and Second Thessalonians, and it was like I was new in discovering all this concept of kind of the real Jesus. I call it. I call him kind of the real Jesus, because we have this idea in our culture of like what Jesus means and what Christianity means. And it's just, the church, unfortunately, when man gets involved in something that's of a divine origin, it's going to be super corrupted, and
it's not its original form anymore. I've seen that so many times, time and time again. There's a few Instagram accounts that I follow that specifically highlight that kind of thing. So it's interesting that you say that.
Yeah. So I just, and we this group I was with was just incredible. So I had our leaders, or this married couple that were Mennonites, and learned about their expression of their faith, very communal, very it's kind of similar to the Quakers, and we would just have it was just an amazing summer where we would work really hard all day, and then you feel like you really put in a hard day's work, and then you get to have this encourager circle and this kind of community circle at the end of the day, and to go across and like tell something positive to someone across the circle, and we were all had different duties, and it did feel kind of like a kibbutz in that sense, where we're just living communally for 6 weeks in northern Greece on the side of a mountain. It's just like amazing.
Dude, am I hearing you right when you're saying that for you, seeing and taking care of the burdens of others during that trip really stuck with you, and the community feel of it was also the other, like, I guess, magnetic draw for kind of going forward in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And just the realize, and I when I tell that story to my kids too, I just remember that I had, we took everything we needed for the whole summer in this one duffel bag, and it was like strict weight requirements. And it was like 35 pounds was all you could take for the whole summer. And I remember the beauty of that feeling of just waking up or going to bed at night on my little mat in this tent. And there, my tent mate was there. He had his duffel, I had my duffel, and that's all. It was like,
that's all you needed.
It didn't need anything. I mean, we were so content, and we were so happy. And another thing in the circle, the evening circle, was like, it was a time to air any grievances and to ask for forgiveness or to apologize. And I mean, it was just like, as a 17-year-old, it was like, okay, and here we are where a lot of the book of Acts unfolded. And I was just like, okay, sign me up. Like I'm in for this kind of community and this kind of faith journey that has nothing to do with what I consider religion. I think religiosity, or like the worst thing anybody could tell me was like, or can tell me is, in my opinion, I mean, I'm not offended or anything like that, but it's like, oh yeah, Kirby, he's a real religious guy. I'm like,
Kirby, that makes two of us. I don't want to hear that about Andy, because I am not a real religious guy. I'm very spiritual, very much connected to my creator and all that kind of stuff, just like you. And I'm like,
right.
Religion has a way of kind of skewing spirituality and our direct connection to the big man upstairs. So just
exactly.
Very, 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 very different. And to your point earlier, when we do see man put their hands on, certain aspects of what God has created, it's like it gets completely like skewed and corrupted to the nth degree. So yeah, I'm totally on board with you. So you're preaching to the choir, so to speak.
Okay.
So like from that regard, man, like, that must have been a very, very powerful thing. You just said something also about the evening sessions where people spent time airing their grievances and just getting it off their chest without letting it like fester or stew for a day or another day, and then these other feelings coming up. So very great, like foundational things to learn at such a very, very young age of forgiveness, community building, taking care of others, and then treating people the right way. So yeah, must have been just an amazing experience.
Yeah, it really was. And that really kindled in my heart this desire. We were in this tiny little town, and there were like two little cafes, and we was like the biggest treat. We would get every Friday, we would get to go in and get souvlaki from this lady that was just thrilled that she had this big group of people lining up to get her chicken souvlaki.
That's funny.
And it was like this pita bread with almost like similar to like chicken fajita meat. Yeah, as we have to if I translate it into Texan for you, that's how we would describe it. But it had this really great mustard, and just the simplicity of this tiny town, and getting to know, just like that idea of like the fascination of learning about other people's cultures and trying to understand, what their challenges are locally. And, just that whole experience for me really was like, okay, I want to do something where I get to work with people from all different cultural and faith backgrounds and just learn. I just love listening and hearing different people's faith journeys and life journeys. And so a lot of the work that I do now, that led to me going back with that organization. And I volunteered, and I just said, hey, I'll go anywhere.
Okay.
And they needed a counselor. I was in college, spent a summer living right on the edge of the slums there in a major city in South Asia. And, just to experience that. And so a lot of the work that I've done with my charity has been to help people in those extreme situations of extreme poverty, and some of the things you mentioned at the top about the orphan crisis and the human trafficking crisis. And my photography is always such a great bridge for conversation, and I love just sitting down with people. And when you walk into the slums and some of these slum communities in South Asia and in Africa, they're first of all pretty shocked that a foreigner, because obviously I stick out. I obviously don't have the appearance of an Asian or African. So they're first of all, and I'm pretty tall as well. So I just kind of like, it's a bit of a surprise to see this big white dude kind of walking through with a camera.
Completely fearless.
Yeah, I'm just there, and it's been great. I think some of my most, what would I say, where I've felt the most honored in life have been in the slums, where people invite me into their little shanty, and they get a chair ready for me. Or usually it's just dusting off their cot and pulling it out and having me sit on the edge of their cot. And then, getting together whatever kind of coffee or tea they can find. And I have this one specific memory of being in the slums of a South Asian city. And my field director was telling me how they make what they call a weak coffee, because they have to ration their coffee grinds. And so it's like this kind of clear, looks more like tea, and they serve it in a clear glass. And I just thought, here they are sharing their coffee ration, generously with me. And, just to sit in their little shanty and hear their story through the interpreter, it's just such an honor. It's just, you're part of humanity. And it goes back to that spaceship analogy. It's like, like literally, if we were on a spaceship on a journey for 70, 80, 100 years, and there were only 1,000 people on the spaceship, wouldn't you want to get out and like go around and meet some of the other people that are on this journey with you? And that's kind of what I like to think of in terms of traveling. And I just feel like we're all neighbors. And that's where this, this concept of, the real Jesus that I follow, it talks about loving your neighbor as yourself. And I think that if everybody could just get this picture of the gospel being that not only of like spiritual awakening, but also a big part of what the concept of the gospel that Jesus was espousing was what's called in Judaism the tikkun olam, which is their whole concept of taking up an offering. At the synagogue, they called it for the tikkun olam, which is for the repair of a broken world, is the translation.
Oh,
and
wow.
so this idea of the gospel, as we experience spiritual rebirth and we have spiritual eyes for a bigger picture of what our mission on this journey is, then we start to do things that repair this broken world, this broken, situation that we find ourselves in.
So almost almost sounds like, hey, finding our true purpose, which a lot of folks out there are always looking for or searching for and that sort of thing. And once you tap into that and realize that our true purpose is, for some people maybe, hey, I want to make sure that I can raise up the consciousness of humanity. Who knows what the case may be, but everybody has their different idea of it. And it sounds like that's what's coming through for you and kind of getting the organizations up and running.
Yeah. And so that's really the inspiration for me is I want to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And I think, whatever your worldview is or whatever your journey is, I think that it kind of comes to that divide. Like you're either being a part of repairing a broken world or you're contributing to the brokenness of our world, and it's, I think also people probably don't stop to realize like what an impact they can have. And I've blogged a lot. I've done some experiments where I live. I try to empathize with these, with my neighbors in these, extremely impoverished situations. And so what I've done several times is I'll go to the grocery store and I'll take $30 because a lot of our brothers and sisters around the world are living on approximately $1, $2 a day, US equivalent. And so I'm clear on the, because I get a lot of feedback like, that's not really a valid experiment because you live in a house and all this kind of thing. And so I say, I'm trying to simply gain perspective into one aspect of their struggle. Obviously I didn't move into the slums and really experience what their life, but in that, living off of $30 worth of food over 30 days is my challenge. And I've got several blogs I've published on the 30 days on $30 of food challenge is what I call it. And I'm not the creator of this challenge. It's something that's been around for a while. But in this, I've really learned a lot about, about their struggle. And one of the things that I do, what I try to do with the blog is it's not just to show like, oh, here's how you can live off of $30 of food. Some people consult the blog for that, but
yeah, because I'm trying to think like, do I eat popcorn every day all day, or like, do I just eat lettuce? Like, how do I do it?
Yeah, well, incidentally, it is shocking to see how you can make it work, and it's surprising what you can do with $30 if you get staples.
So what would be some of the staples if we had to go into it real quick? Because I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Potatoes, carrots, oatmeal, cabbage, a couple of cans of tomato sauce, a lot of eggs, a lot of you get some flour and you can make your own tortillas. Okay. So and I have all kind of variations. I get the ramen noodle packs, make all kind of soups from the vegetables. And, when you have a little bit of, it's just a little bit of seasoning goes a long way in a lot of these. And you can make, you can ration your potatoes to do baked fries and do a Mexican oatmeal. It's like a savory oatmeal with an egg on top. It's really surprising. But what I try to do with the blog is because it gets a lot of attention, some media attention and that kind of thing. So what I try to do is I kind of bait people to confess, I bait people with the shocker of like, living off of $1 of food per day for 30 days. And then I try to reel them in and get them to read the blog and say, you actually can make a difference. Here I am, just some dude, living off of $1 a day. And look at my life. I don't even have a college degree. I started a little business out. I dropped out of college and started a business, and just bootstrapping some things together. But then I started this charity back in the early '90s, and we were talking the other day when we were chatting.
Oh yeah.
And and I said, I was young enough to believe that I couldn't fail, and that's a lot. That's a lot.
That is the quote of the day right there. Young enough to believe that you couldn't fail. That's it. There was nothing else you knew but upside.
Yeah. So, I think a lot of people really, they live in this kind of defeated place where they're like, that's so great what Kirby does. I could never make an impact like him. And I just try to get people to change their mentality of like, you actually absolutely can make a difference. And my catchphrase is that if together we overcome indifference, we can make a difference.
Wow.
And yeah. And, it's like that thing of like, well, I don't know, we just get hung up on little things, thinking that we can't make a difference. And I think that leads to that kind of indifference, like, you hear about some problem or some crisis, or the human trafficking crisis or the orphan crisis. Oh, that's so heartbreaking. Gosh, that's awful. We're so blessed here, or whatever the common thinking is. But, what can you, if you were to listen in on maybe like a coffee conversation of two people talking about this problem on the other side of the world, they would probably, some of them might often say, well, what are you going to do? And then they just go on to another. And I call that indifference. It's sort of, it's not a judgment. I think a lot of people sincerely, their heart does break for that. But my challenge is like, together, if we work together, we can totally make a huge difference, And so that's the thing. As a fundraiser for my charity, and it's inspiring, because I think a lot of people have had a heart change to see, like, and the photography, that's a big part of it. Is I love to show the smiles of the people that we're helping. And I think that's been really inspirational for a lot of people to see, like, wow, this is, hope is really a thing that's happening here. So
like transformational. So you mentioned when we talked the other day, you said you linked up with another guy who was an orphan. Was that it?
Yeah.
So when you two got together, it's almost like two people having coffee, like you just said. But instead of having that indifference, you said, wait, we can make a difference, so let's get rolling. And then did it just kind of like take off from there kind of thing?
No, it took several years. And actually the small business that I was talking about was a record label, an indie record label. I've always been involved in the arts in some way. I'm not a musician myself. I love music though. So I was always surrounding myself with musicians and friends and bands and things like that. And so I started a record label. And so part of the model of the record label was that part of the profits went to help my buddy in South Asia to start an orphan home. And so, we just slowly over time, we had more and more people. I had a little newsletter that I would do, old school, like go down to Kinko's with the color copies and snail mail out newsletters before the internet. And so we, I had a few people. I just like to tell the story, and it wasn't so much about, that it was very small and organic back then. And I had, but I had a couple of donors who, eventually were like, hey, it might be nice to get a tax break on these donations. So you might want to think about setting up your 501c3. So then later in the 90s, we actually got that together and started our website and started that journey. But yeah, it took a while to get that off the ground.
Yeah, no, everybody thinks things happen as like an overnight success, but there's so many baby steps and little failures and little successes that happen to make for the longer term success and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my my biggest encouragement to young people who get really fired up, because you see so many people start a charity or start some kind of movement or website or blog to try to, get people to rally behind a cause that they're passionate about. And I think they do oftentimes expect these overnight results. And my basically my life mantra is slow and steady wins the race. Because if you just consistently keep moving toward your goal, then you're eventually going to get the critical mass that you need. But you've got to be prepared that it's a marathon and not a 400-meter sprint. Exactly. So that's my big encouragement, is just like then the failures will definitely come. I mean, for the first 10 years, well, I'd say the first 7 or 8 years of doing Peace Gospel, the fundraising was kind of up and down, or, the record label would have a good quarter or a bad quarter. And yet the needs were consistent in the field with the orphan home and the orphan care and the trafficking response, outreach. And so, it dawned on me, we needed some kind of business enterprise in the field. And so we tried all these different things that, were kind of a Western mindset that I was trying to transpose onto their Asian culture, and of course those failed.
You have to think different. You have to think differently.
Yeah. And so we tried a printing press and a internet cafe and all these different ideas that were not translating into their culture or their wheelhouse. My team there, they were all raised very poor in a village context. So they didn't have this idea of like a Western, like in the West, we would have
industry and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so, so it was a beautiful story. My partner, he called me, one day, and he was like, could pray for my sister. This real hardship has hit her. And I was like, well, what happened? And he said, he told me that her water buffalo, her dairy water buffalo had died. This water buffalo that she would milk to sell the milk. And that was like her whole, livelihood. And I was like, wait a second. First of all, I was sorry. Oh my gosh, she that's horrible. I'll definitely pray for her, but tell me about this water buffalo. Like, how does she make her whole living off of this one, cow? And so then that's why we started our own dairy farm. Water Buffalo Dairy Farm was our first like eureka moment, where it's like, okay, they get agricultural business. And so we bought a little plot of land, and we bought some water buffalo, and we started a dairy business in South Asia. And so that's one of those things where it just, you have, this trial and error kind of approach, and you just have to be ready and prepared to learn from your failures, and look at those as like, almost like I would kind of consider them like tuition payments in the school of life, Yeah.
Tuition payments in the school of life. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So just so the listeners can get an even deeper understanding for the different programs of the orphans and some of the child labor victims and the survivors of sex trafficking, are you telling me and telling the listeners that you are not only helping to raise their level of feeling good about themselves first and foremost, and kind of reframing their mindset, but are you actually helping them to get business opportunities, it seems like?
Yeah. We have several schools. We have, between our schools and our after school care programs of 9 different education centers. And then we have 2 trade schools that we've set up, one in South Asia and one in Uganda, that they exist to. And in some classifications, we actually would have 2 trade schools in Uganda, but it depends on what category we're talking about. But it's just nonetheless, these trade schools are set up for survivors of human trafficking. We have a rehabilitation program with counseling and medical attention and a rehabilitate, kind of a holistic care approach for their post-trauma journey. And part of that is equipping them with skills. And so you see these young girls who, a lot of them are discovering artistic talents they didn't realize they had. And that's a beautiful thing to watch unfold as these survivors realize that they actually have a skill or a talent that they can use and they can create something with their hands. And so we focus a lot on the tailoring trade because in developing world contexts, it's not very common that you would just go into a shop and pick out what they call a ready-made piece of clothing. They find the fabric and they take it to a tailor, and the tailor makes it for them. And so it's a real in-demand business. And our graduates are some of the happiest people. You see these girls holding up their certificates, and they're so proud because they came from such impoverished backgrounds that they, and their families could never imagine them going to a school that they would receive a diploma from. And so there's a real, you can see the sense of dignity that really is restored to them, that they have teachers and staff that really pour into them and believe in them and encourage them and challenge them too, to realize their God-given potential. And that's just that restorative process. And then we commission them into small business, and we do follow up, and we support them in their journey of entrepreneurship. And if they don't want to start their own businesses, we try to help them find jobs where they can utilize those skills. And our latest iteration of this holistic approach is where we're focusing to develop more on our restoration steps. So we do a lot of prevention work. So it starts with prevention, where we try to train young girls how to spot and identify the tricks and deceptions that the traffickers utilize in their crime. And that way we can try to cut it off at the pass. And so we train hundreds of girls, and we go into schools and remote areas and train them. And a lot of them just aren't aware of this. And so it's just usually like a 2-day workshop where the school lets us come in and train these girls how to avoid the traffickers. And then we do some intervention as our second step, where we try to identify where there's suspicious cases that our very vigilant staff on the border are trained to spot, like, okay, here's an older guy with 3 younger girls. This doesn't look right. Tip off the authorities.
Looks sketchy already. Yeah,
a little sketchy, exactly. And so they just work to tip off the border patrol, and so we're not actually involved in getting in the way of law enforcement. We let law enforcement do their job. And fortunately, that's led to the liberation of a lot of slaves who are being trafficked across the border and traded between brothels and all kinds of stuff. It's unfathomable, and has led to the incarceration and conviction of several traffickers. So that these women that are on the border are such heroes, to be there and to be brave and kind of getting in the middle of the traffickers' business. And then then we have the rehabilitation step of these 4 steps. And that's what I've just been talking about. But then this final step, which we call restoration, is the kind of after the follow-up care, making sure that their businesses are off and running well. But then now our newest pilot program is to have our own storefront. We've started our own tailoring storefront where people in a major city in South Asia can come for tailoring services. And we have a master tailor who this lady will be kind of overseeing their apprenticeship, so that we have some of the graduates who aren't ready to start their own businesses or aren't ready to find a job, or we want to kind of continue our care a little more thoughtfully for these types of candidates. That way we can bring them into a real world business setting and provide them that apprenticeship and that further training in in a real world business context. So that's a little bit of what we're doing. And then of course we do, a lot of the response, in my view, a lot of the response to human trafficking comes in terms of prevention, comes in the form of orphan care, because unfortunately orphans are the most vulnerable in being trafficked. So we feel that orphan care is kind of part and parcel and real integral to the human trafficking crisis response. We've really got to take care of orphans and make sure that they don't get on that path. So that's a bit of an overview of what we're up to in 5 different countries in Asia and Africa.
Man, I love the 4-step process. I love the fact that it's not just, hey, we're throwing money at this thing and let the money kind of roll through it. You're really actually taking steps to uplift these people and empower them more than anything else, from a mental capacity, a self-respect standpoint, as well as a financial standpoint. So again, fantastic work. If anyone wanted to find out more about Peace Gospel or She Has Hope, what would they do? Where could they go to find out information on those 2 organizations as well as Kirby?
Yeah. So peacegospel.org, that's kind of our bigger umbrella organization. And then shehashope.org is where, so She Has Hope is sort of the banner under which we call attention to our human trafficking response programs. And really just about everything we do with Peace Gospel is human trafficking response in some form or another. But we realized that there are a lot of people, thankfully, that are real passionate about being involved in human trafficking response. And we wanted to give that a separate banner that people could kind of get under and rally behind that specific cause. And so it was several years back, we, coming up on almost a decade now that we created this. I was in a cafe and I was talking to a friend and showing them my pictures from a recent visit to South Asia. And I was pointing at one of the survivors and I said, look, she has hope. And it stuck with me. And I finished the meeting. I immediately went to, name.com or one of those, and like shehashope.org is available. I was like, oh, sweet. This is it. Wow. I just knew immediately that was the name. And, so, we try to we have a little shop on shehashope.org where you can buy survivor made, handicrafts, jewelry and different handcrafted items.
I saw that. And those are at such great price points as well. I was just really blown away by the detail of the work and the fact that it was so affordable that if a kid saved up their allowance, they can actually make a difference for anyone in the program. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Thanks for checking it out,
dude. No, you're doing just a great job, amazing job. From the idea of this going so well that now you've got into photography, going back a few years and getting published in National Geographic. What was that like, being able to capture all these different faces that you're helping out, all these different communities that you're getting to be a part of? But what was that like to be able to capture that and then have it be represented on a broad scale publication that basically started your whole journey, like you said at the top of the show?
Yeah. And just for the record, I was not published in the National Geographic magazine. Now that would be amazing. It was a National Geographic published book. That one of my photos was
just as relevant, my friend, just as relevant.
Yeah. Because some people are like, oh, what issue were you in? I was like, no, it's not. I wasn't actually in the big flagship magazine, but in a book. So it's really interesting story of how, you just never know how a connection is going to happen. And so we had an intern many years back who turned us on to an organization called the One World Play Project. Okay. It was co-founded by Sting, and he was at a bar one night and was chatting with this guy who had invented a virtually indestructible soccer ball because he had traveled to the developing world, and he would see how, as I have seen, these kids will just get duct tape or whatever they can find to create their own little makeshift soccer ball, of course, as everywhere else in the world calls it a football. And so he had this idea, it's kind of this honeycomb pattern inside, and you could like puncture it with a knife and it would just keep
working.
It keeps its bounce, and everything's incredible invention. And so I would always take a big duffel bag of these virtually indestructible soccer balls over and go into the slums and just like let them loose. And kids are just going nuts, just loving having this sturdy soccer ball in their little play area. And so I took some photos of these kids who were all, dirty. They're in this particular slum colony. It's at the base of a landfill where they scavenge through the city's trash looking for recyclables. And, so the kids are involved, and so I interrupted their work. And so they're just filthy, sweaty, but they've got the bright blue One World football with their big smiles. And I put it on Twitter and I tagged One World Play Project. And so I had several of these photos that I was always tagging them on Twitter. And so they contacted me and they were like, "We love your photos. Can we use them in our publicity and everything?" And so they started publishing my photos and crediting me. And then I had a third party licensing agency contact me saying they wanted to use one of the photos in a book without telling me it was a Nat Geo publication. And so I think that it was smart of them to do that. I wouldn't have cared either way in terms of, the licensing fee, which I donated back to Peace Gospel anyway.
Right.
But it was just interesting because then after I signed everything, they were like, "Congratulations, it's going to be in this Nat Geo book." And I was just like, floored because, as part of my story is like when I was 6 years old, I got my first Nat Geo subscription. So yeah, just a testament of like how you never know, what, who's going to pick up what or who's going to see what. Yeah.
The part of that story right there that I love the most that resonates with me is the fact that you were willing to give it without anything in return. You're like, they can have it. I didn't even need to get the licensing fee. And you just actually ultimately gave it away at the end of the day. So that was amazing. So question from a photography standpoint, being that you're so experienced, so well-versed in that area, what would you say are two or three great ideas that our listeners can use or can use to take better photos and make better memories?
That's a good question. For me, I never took a photography class. I learned everything I know about photography by watching the masters, looking at the masters' photos, and watching some documentaries on some of the great photographers and hearing, some of them they have, footage of interviews and just hearing about how they look at it. But for me, really, it's about, I think you want to try to get the camera out of the way. So it's not an impediment. It's a tool that actually is helping you capture an emotion or a moment in time. And a lot of times that's a challenge because these cameras today have a million gizmos and options and computers and whatever. And so I shoot with a camera called Leica. It's a German-made camera, and it's really broken down. Yeah, it's like I love that it's mostly analog, and you've got tactile dials, and it really teaches you the fundamentals of, you've got basically four things: aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and focus. And it's manual. I use only manual focus. And it was really challenging to learn the balance of how all those things work together. But then once I did, then I got the fundamentals, and I can walk into any room or any setting and almost know instinctively, like what aperture I'm going to use, what shutter speed, et cetera. And so that, you just don't want the equipment to get in the way of what you're seeing. You want that to just be a fluid aid in capturing what it is you're feeling. So, but I mean, that's a bit of a technical answer.
So I'll break it down. I think what I heard you say, if I was a listener, what I heard you say is, don't let the technology take the picture. As a human, get involved. Take it off of auto settings on your nice fancy camera. Put it on manual. That's first step. What would be the other two that you would add to that?
Yeah, and I would just say that I think you can get a lot of inspiration from studying other great photographers to see like, oh, wow, if I move the camera down a little bit and got this line leading up to the lens, then that's a game changer, and it just sometimes, a lot of times I think people recognize a great photo when they see it. And they'll say, oh, wow, that's such a great photo. A lot of people don't take the next step to ask the question, well, what is it that makes it? Why do I think it's a great photo? And as you study it, then you start to see, oh, there's just some little tricks, once you realize there's some common little rules, the rule of thirds, for example, like, here I am on this, there's this line. And then if you divided the frame into three and you line up the subject on the third, there's something magic that happens. Whereas, if you just shoot or like this in the middle, then it's kind of like, that's not a great photo, but for some reason, when it's centered over here, it suddenly looks better, and it's just like, doesn't really make any logical, you wouldn't guess that, but when you see it, you kind of know it.
So you actually gave us 4 in a sneaky kind of way. So number 1, get involved as a human by taking the photo, take it off of the auto mode. Number 2, study great masters who have taken lots of great photography and that sort of thing. Number 3, pay attention to the details. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And then the 4th one, just lining it up into thirds. That's an amazing one. I never heard that one before. So really, really good.
And leading lines and you can, anybody who's aspiring to be a great photographer, just Google, search up, common photography rules or themes or ideas or tricks. And you'll find, a lot of these. And then a lot of guys are like, oh, those are all rules for breaking and they don't fall, and there's definitely some context where you're like, actually, this looks great centered. And so you shouldn't do like every photo on the third, but yeah, there's just so many great resources out there where you just go, some of it's definitely learned. Like there's some things that you have to study and like, there's some skills that you can pick up. And part of that is like learning how to use a camera and what all those major settings mean. And that just takes a lot of practice.
A lot of shots.
But there are a lot of things that you can just kind of mimic, like what do the masters do? Like try to copy it almost, like, cause that will teach you, like maybe have a set of favorite photos and then go, okay, I'm going to go out today and I'm going to try to get shots like these today and see what it feels like to get at that perspective or line it up like that. And then go, and then suddenly, when you nail it, you'll go, okay. And then it's like riding a bicycle. Then you'll always remember what that felt like when you nailed one that you were like super proud. Because that was when I was first shooting with my Leica and it was all in these manual settings. I was like literally 99 out of 100 were just crap.
Like, what did I do? Why did I spend this money on this camera?
Oh. Yeah. Oh, totally. I bought that camera like, I got it. I received it a day before I was leaving on an international trip, and I was like reading the manual on the flight over, and then I was at the destination just going, what? But it was that one out of the 100 that really was amazing, and I somehow by luck nailed it, and I got it, and then I was like, okay, this is why people love this kind of camera, and I love the manual feel of it. And so, yeah, like we were talking about earlier, like most things in life, you just can't give up. You got to keep trying, never give up, just keep working at it. And then eventually you'll just be like, wow, okay, something clicked here and I got it. And that was a lot, my journey really began with Instagram. I got on Instagram in May of 2011 and I was going on a trip to the Philippines. We have some programs there. And a friend of mine named Keely Scott, she worked with Compassion International for years as one of their
great organization
photographers. And I just was like, oh man, I just look at her blog and just be like, oh, I'll never, like, I didn't even imagine, I wasn't even fantasizing about being as good of a photographer as she was. It was just like out of the realm of possibilities. But we had just run into each other right before I was leaving for my trip. And I had just gotten on Instagram and we followed each other. And I was in the Philippines, and I took a shot and I put it on Instagram, and she liked it. I was like, what? Like, how is that even, what is she doing liking my photos? And then yeah. And then I was like, oh, and then, you start hashtagging, and people from all over the world start commenting on your photos. And then something clicked for me at that time, which was like, okay, photos tell a 1 second story of 1,000 words.
Absolutely.
And that was a real light bulb that went off of like, okay, finally I have a medium through which I can reach people all over the world to tell the stories of the people that I'm trying to speak up for. And that's when it definitely just kind of really became exciting for me that photography could be that vehicle that could change people's minds and give them perspective into worlds that they had never before visited. And back to the whole National Geographic, concept of this portal.
So I'm going to take you back to that summer camp in Greece. You talked about the community aspect of it. From there, creating your two organizations, you created a community within those two. And now hearing your story about photography and Instagram, dude, you created a whole nother community via Instagram for photography as well. So man, just really, really massive impact you're having. Essentially community building.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is like, I major shout out to my brother, Renzo Grande. He is a fellow photographer from New York City, and he and I met years ago through Instagram, and he started this whole brilliant project called the 24-Hour Project. And he single-handedly, I mean, he's definitely has a lot of support, but he's the one that's carried the torch. And he basically has organized, I'm pretty sure it's like the world's largest single day photography event, where once a year, thousands of photographers register for this experience where we all meet up at midnight and we start shooting whatever city we're in for 24 hours. So we're documenting a 24-hour life cycle of whatever city it is we're in. And the challenge is that you have to publish a photo every hour. And so it totally takes you out of your comfort zone, and it pushes you to go, okay, I got Jack Taco here. I don't know what, I mean, I don't have anything to publish, but okay, well, here it goes. Dang it. And you just have some real duds, but it's like totally pushes you out of the nest and like gets you out of your comfort zone. But then, inevitably you'll have one where you're like, oh yes, like I nailed it. Got a great shot, and you publish. And then it's just this physically exhausting, like, cause you're literally staying awake you've been up all day, you meet up at midnight, and then you push through for 24 hours on a quest to find a great photo every hour. And he does it for a charitable impact. And She Has Hope has been featured a couple of years, and we've had thousands of photographers from all over the world get together, and you follow the hashtag. I typically run up to New York City to do it because there's so many great, like you have better chances of getting a great photo in 1 hour in New York City than anywhere else. But
for sure.
Yeah. So there's just, in terms of photography and community, and I have found that photographers make for great friends and community members, and you have so much common ground, and it's again, I think a lot of the world's problems could be solved if we focused on what we have in share rather than what we disagree on. And photography is a great vehicle for that.
It just it has no judgment on the subject. It's just capturing that subject in the moment, and all the other things, the labels, the ideologies, and all these other things, they're not attached to the picture. We're just getting this raw image of the subject. So yeah. Great project. What a crazy idea. 24-hour project. Love it, love it, love it. So getting down to the end of our time here a little bit, two things. You've traveled around the world. You've seen a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different people, a lot of different environments. What would you say the human side of greatness looks like to you?
God, that's a big question. I mean, I think I see it in just the way that people take care of each other. I think that unfortunately, media is set up to be a failure. I mean, you think about just in terms of the capitalistic venture of a news media corporation. I'm sure there's a lot of great people in journalism. I'm sure, you know, and I don't, you know, believe that anybody sets out to be a journalist with bad intentions. But I think by way of the machine, they're in need of sensationalism to keep the revenue machine going. And so the temptation in journalism and media today is to highlight the shocking things, the upsetting things that make you want to go like, no way, that can't be. Let me click on that, or let me tune into that.
Straight up teaser. Clickbait.
Yeah, you know, and it's unfortunate because you can always find, you know, the worst cases of anything. And that's what extremism is, you know, and if we, you know, I was actually, I was spending an extended amount of time in a South Asian city, at one season of my life. And, there were riots that were taking place in the city where I was living temporarily. And there were protests and riots, and you would turn on the news and it looked like there were just like thousands of people because of the perspective of the camera. And then it was like a mistake or something. Like they didn't realize the feed was still live, and you got this other angle. And it was like, you could tell like all these people were like bunched in, crowded up toward the camera. And then like you just saw like the rest of the streets were just completely empty. But, you know, it's like that we're trying to give this impression that things are always worse than they are. And so the human side of greatness to me is actually in the majority. I mean, I feel like we've been conditioned to be pessimists in our world. And I'm a hardcore idealist, and my more realistic friends will be like, oh, you know, yeah, that's Kirby. You know, he has such a bright perspective on everything. But this is my experience, really. And I will argue this to the day I die. Like, most people out there are really in their communities. Like they're looking out for their neighbors, and they're, you know, not mean spirited. And, you know, there's always bad apples in every community. And there's definitely been times I've been in the slums where I'm looking over my shoulder and there was a knife fight I witnessed, or, you know, people, you know, following me, looking kind of suspicious or whatever. But the majority are just good-hearted people out there that really care about each other and care about their families, and really hardworking people just trying to make an honest living. I think that's the vast majority of our world. And so it really breaks my heart when I see so much bad news in the headlines, and it's human nature. I mean, there's not a lot we're going to be able to do about that in terms of what we're digesting, other than to try to encourage people. What I try to encourage people to do, like on my Instagram following, when I try to write a lot in my captions, is like tune out. I can almost have this tune out.
You almost have to. Yeah, you almost have to.
Yeah, you have to be careful of what you're being fed, because if all you're getting is a constant stream of negative information and the emphasis on all of the bad things that are happening, then you're gonna just be you're just gonna be in such a bad mindset all the time, and you're gonna lose hope. And I really think the hope is found in the context and the sensitivity of all of our issues currently in the United States. Even is like, we could just start with simple things like smile and wave at the neighbor. You know, I mean, just, it's like right here, we can make a difference, you know? And I think that's the unfortunate tinderbox that we're in. But I just try to encourage everybody to keep a positive spirit and look on the bright side. And it's a great question. I mean, I think that human side of greatness is just in everyday people trying to make an honest living and trying to take care of each other and
being kind.
Yeah, be kind. It costs you nothing.
You know, it's funny you said that thing about waving and saying hello. I'm a big advocate of, I just want to say hello. If I'm driving by or walking by, I'll just give a wave or whatever, just to see if that person opens back up and waves back. They don't have to, but I just want to see what the reaction is, because oftentimes we have these concepts in our heads before we get close to that person in our interaction, and just a wave might actually change something in their mind. So that's kind of like my thoughts on that as well. So coming down to the final question here, I think you've given quite a few of them already, but I was looking for one quote from you that you can share with our listeners for them to take away from with this episode as something you live by, or a motto that you like to share with folks.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to be a little bit redundant on that one, because I think slow and steady wins the race is everything. I mean, I think we've got to, wasn't it Winston Churchill who said, and it could be one of those famous misattributed quotes. I get suckered into those. I have no idea. I think he said, though, like, never, 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 never give up. Wasn't that? I'm pretty
sure that was Churchill.
Yeah. And so I think it's like that. Just know that you're gonna, man, I mean, there are going to be things where you're going to feel like you're just totally knocked down, and really there have been many points along the way where I'm just like, really, like I could just I'd rather be a coffee shop manager next year, like I just like, just go and I just make coffee and I smile at people, and because it just, running a charity, you would think that it's all rainbows and roses, but it can get difficult. I always try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and we're all, and I think this is another key thing, is that if we realize that people are oftentimes, when we encounter somebody that's hostile toward us, if we can take a step back and go, okay, there's probably a wound that they're operating out of that has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that could disarm, 99% of our world's problems. If everybody could just take a breath and go, okay, I realize, like, it's not about me. But we're all human. And so when those conflicts do occur, it can be really disheartening, but you got to keep getting up, and you got to keep going. And remember that back to the ocean metaphor, like we're part of something bigger, peace gospel, she has hope. All this is not about me. I'm just the guy that's leading it. I'm the one waving the banner, but really it's more about much more about the people, my partners in the field that are in the trenches day in and day out and helping these people. So.
Well, bro, I got to tell you, thank you for that portion right there, because you have given so many people hope, and you're not giving up, like Churchill said.
Yeah.
And you continue to build these communities. I'm excited to see what the next community you'll build on top of Instagram, as well as She Has Hope and Peace Gospel. So I'm very excited to see what the next evolution looks like for you, and that sort of thing. So, with that said, man, I want to just really thank you for taking time out to be on the podcast.
No, it's been a pleasure. I applaud you for what you're doing here, and it's so great that you've got all these listeners out there. And greetings to all of you guys. Keep on, press on. You can definitely make a difference. So just keep up the good fight.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the human side of greatness, my friend.
All right, brother. Good to see you. Thank you.